The Gillard government is continuing to push ahead with the final details of its agreement with Malaysia for an asylum seeker swap. Tonight, Lateline can reveal reservations within the UNHCR in Canberra over the government's plans for the reopening of the Manus Island processing centre in Papua New Guinea. Documents obtained by Lateline reveal the unease within the organisation over any agreement between the two countries. And refugee lawyers say the potential arrangements could give asylum seekers on Manus Island access to the Australian legal system. And there's a further potential legal headache for the federal government, with the Governor of Port Moresby saying he'll launch a constitutional challenge to any deal. Steve Kinane and Alison McClymont compiled this exclusive story.
Manus Island lies a few hundred kilometres north of the PNG mainland. Between 2001 and 2004, it was home to a detention centre that housed asylum seekers as part of the Howard government's Pacific solution. In opposition, Julia Gillard was against it.
We have committed to ending the so-called Pacific solution. We would not have offshore processing in Manus Island and Nauru.
In government, she wants to revive it.
We've been exploring with PNG the possibility for an assessment centre to be based there.
But the foundations for any deal between PNG and Australia are looking increasingly shaky. Lateline has obtained a confidential internal paper from the UNHCR's Canberra office, which raises several serious concerns about the plan, including the current state of PNG politics.
PNG politics can be slow and unpredictable. The serious illness of the Prime Minister Somare is a complicating factor, as it was widely believed his blessing was required before the Cabinet will approve any arrangements.
In the PNG Cabinet, the two main supporters of the plan have been Michael Somare and the Foreign Minister, Don Pollier. The Prime Minister had heart surgery in Singapore 9 weeks ago and is still recovering. On Monday, Don Pollier was dumped as Foreign Minister. In recent weeks, Parliament has been adjourned several times because not enough MPs turned up to vote. If any deal goes ahead, the PNG government wants it to be part of the Bali process, the regional forum co-chaired by Australia and Indonesia that deals with people smuggling. Julia Gillard is trying to sell the plan as being part of a regional framework.
If this proceeds, it's my expectation that it would start as an assessment centre, but it would be one step towards creating a regional processing centre.
But that statement is contradicted in the internal UNHCR paper.
As it stands, it is difficult to see how the arrangements are different from those under the Pacific solution, despite the Australian government's anxiety that they be seen as different from a policy that it once criticised as inhumane and unprincipled.
The paper also raises the prospect of legal challenges.
On the issue of legal responsibility under the Convention, that this is an extraterritorial processing arrangement by Australia, largely for its own purposes, and that its obligations under the Refugee Convention remain in full force and effect. Jurisdiction is retained by Australia and not transferred to PNG.
And that means if asylum seekers are processed in PNG, they could have access to Australian courts.
Look, under this sort of deal where Australia effectively controls and operates all the arrangements, including footing the bills and conducting the processing with Australian officials, it simply cannot wash its hands of legal responsibility. In fact, it may well retain full legal responsibility under both international and Australian law for what Australian officials do and what they decide in relation to people transferred there under this plan.
It's clear from this document that, unlike the Malaysian deal, the UNHCR is unlikely to be involved in processing asylum seekers on Manus Island.
Operationally, UNHCR does not envisage any role.
It also suggests the International Office for Migration, who ran the centres under the Pacific solution, will be hard to get on side.
IOM is still chastened by its Pacific solution role and is likely to be very circumspect in involvement and possibly reluctant without UNHCR partnership.
Minutes from a meeting involving UNHCR headquarters in Geneva show the organisation didn't want to be associated with Julia Gillard's announcement of the Manus Island plan.
UNHCR would, however, want to be kept out of the official references, press releases, on this bilateral agreement.
Look, it's clear from the document that the UNHCR sees this plan as a highly inappropriate bilateral side deal which does not fit into a regional cooperation framework and could even undermine it. And that's because it's driven by Australia seeking to buck past its own legal responsibilities onto a poor neighbouring country without any real burden sharing or benefits for PNG.
Unlike Malaysia, PNG is a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention. But the UNHCR paper from Canberra raises serious concerns about PNG's ability to handle asylum seekers.
Overall assessment of PNG's compliance under the 1951 Convention, very poor.
It goes on to say there is no legal framework to address refugee issues in PNG. It has porous borders and little protection for refugees.
It's just a concern that basic rights are just not going to be respected simply because of the inability of Papua New Guinea to do it. It's not a question of Papua New Guinea not wanting to do it, they just haven't got capacity.
The UNHCR paper suggests that detainees were psychologically damaged by their experience at Manus Island under the Pacific Solution.
The previous arrangements involved protracted reception detention that proved to have a profound and negative effect on the psychosocial health of those affected.
And if the Australian government overcomes all the challenges referred to in this paper, there's another hurdle they could face. The Governor of Port Moresby is planning a constitutional challenge against the deal.
Firstly, it's unconstitutional. The law in Papua New Guinea is very clear that we cannot keep people in detention without charging them.
And Powers Parkop doesn't just oppose the plan on legal grounds.
I think that it's immoral of us to, try to be seen to be making money out of misery of some people who are trying to seek a brighter future in Australia, elsewhere in the world, and we're just seeing this from an economic perspective, and it's highly immoral on our part.
A spokesman for the Immigration Minister told Lateline talks are continuing with PNG about an assessment centre which could be used as a regional processing facility, and that the UNHCR and IOM would be consulted before any agreement was finalised. Steve Kinane, Lateline.
Well, the UNHCR in Canberra released this statement earlier this evening. The document referred to by Lateline as an internal note containing the reflections of a UNHCR officer on possible scenarios for future cooperation with Papua New Guinea. The document contains hypothetical scenarios that do not in any way reflect the views or positions of the agency. UNHCR has not been involved in any negotiations between the two countries and is unaware of the state of those discussions, if any. The continued release by the ABC of material that is clearly internal and confidential to UNHCR is both harmful to the agency's ability to discuss and contribute to complex issues and to carry out its mandate of protecting refugees and asylum seekers.